Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest issue of Comic Book Gentlemen, the podcast where we use our decades of being giant nerds to talk about the most divisive issues in the comic book fandom. I'm your host, Greg, joined by my constant co-host, Dave.
Hello.
And today we are joined by our third guest, I believe, on the podcast, Tre Lopushinsky.
Ooh, under 10.
Under 10.
I feel great there.
Yeah.
We're very selective.
Yeah. Dave's never met you in your life.
Oh, he said yes? Okay, let's have one.
We'll take it. So I'm sure you've all seen the title of this podcast. Basically, our theme for this podcast is getting back into comics. And you might be asking yourself, Dave and Greg, you guys read a shit ton of comics. What do you mean you're getting back into it? So that's why we brought Tre in for this podcast, because he recently got back into comics. So before we get into the dirty details of that, Tre, let's start with your base, your foundation. What got you into comics, and what were you reading back in the day, type of thing?
Honestly, my base for I'm a huge nerd across the board, and a lot of people would look at me before they talk to me and not know. Giant guy, huge beard. They're like, oh, there's no way, right? But the fact is it kind of all started when I was young with pro wrestling. Mm-hmm. Pro wrestling was something where, my mom worked 3 jobs. It was just me and her. When she's leaving, she knows I'll be good to just kind of sit down. There's a babysitter there, obviously. She doesn't leave me by myself. Yeah. But, I'm sitting down and just, watching and consuming this larger-than-life, television program. And that was Raw specifically, Monday Night Raw, which is still going on today. But, how that kind of... I've been thinking about this all week since he asked me to be on the podcast. Because I think, honestly, pro wrestling has one of the craziest fan bases of all type of fan base. You can compare it to Kiss fan base, you can compare it to comics, across the board. And I think though it has a real weird spot in pop culture, specifically with nerds. I find not everyone's into it, but I find a lot of people who are into pro wrestling will branch off into things like Magic the Gathering, which I play, comic books, which I read, kind of thing. And when I was younger, I think just what happened is I was watching wrestling, and there's this wrestler named the Hurricane. And Hurricane had this Green Lantern tattoo right on his side, and he was a comic book character. And he'd come in, and he'd be like, I'm the Hurricane, and be like, what's up with that? And that was his character. That's the only thing he did. And from there, I kind of saw that character, and I was reading WWE magazines, WWF at the time, and then I realized that he was a huge comic book fan, and he was talking about it a lot, and his name's Shane Helms. And from there, it just kind of snowballed. And obviously, as a kid too, I was watching X-Men. I watched Spider-Man on TV. I had I remember specifically, because I'm also a huge toy collector, I had this 7-inch bust of Cyclops. And I also had a Sabretooth and a Wolverine. Mm-hmm. But I remember the Sabretooth I put in the dryer, and it ended up getting destroyed. Oh, no. But being a toy collector now, it's I wish I still had those, could repaint them and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%.
But I always was in comic books, but more so with TV and the toys as a kid. I never, and Batman figures too. Mm-hmm. And I never actually read comics. And then it just worked together, where I found watching the Hurricane, reading about that, kind of snowballed into me starting to read comics. I would say around, it's probably 7-8 years old. Oh yeah. And from there, it's basically Spider-Man. That was the thing when I was younger. Spider-Man, X-Men. I wasn't super into.
Here's a big debate Dave and I have all the time: regular Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man. What you reading?
So I was going to get to that.
Okay, sorry. Continue.
Because right now, currently, I am rereading Ultimate Spider-Man. Yeah. And it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But
I told you, Dave.
I'm really enjoying it. And I have a couple questions from there, too, because I want to talk about switching up origin stories. Okay. When you're doing you're going into another series of Spider-Man or what have you. Mm-hmm. We'll get to that.
Okay,
anyway,
sorry.
But yeah, no worries. But leading there, I mean, it was me reading comic books a lot, by myself a lot, watching pro wrestling, collecting toys, and eventually realized, no, this doesn't happen to all nerds. Realized that I really liked females and partying with my friends around high school, and I actually dropped pro wrestling is a huge part of my life, and it always has been, but when I was 17, it was partying with my buddies, hanging out with females, and skateboarding. And that was
wow,
it.
you went full teenager.
Yeah, like that was all I did. I stopped watching pro wrestling; it wasn't cool anymore. Yep. Stopped reading comic books. Still go see the movies because that's what everyone's talking about. Yeah. 100%. But I just threw that away essentially. And in my 20s, which I'm still in right now, I got a month left. But as I was, I don't know, just like as I started kind of growing in life and in my career, I just started getting more and more comfortable with who I am, to be honest. Yep. And I just went back to what I loved and basically, can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, go ahead.
And basically said, I don't give a fuck what people think anymore. Like, this is what I liked. Yeah. Like, I remember an ex-girlfriend I had, she was watching Total Divas. It's a reality TV show of women's wrestlers just doing everyday life. They decided to capitalize on it. I'm watching it, and I just start, like, listing off these wrestlers who, like, weren't around when I was watching TV, but unbeknownst to me, I was kind of keeping track, I guess. Oh, yeah. And I kind of like knew who they were. And then I started seeing some of their matches and like storylines going on that they were carrying onto the show, which I thought was really cool. And I went head first back into wrestling. Oh, yeah. So around 24, 25 years old, I just went deep. To the point where I'm watching Japanese wrestling. I'm watching stuff in Europe. Like I'm getting really big into it. And then I started collecting toys again. And I was going to absolutely every single, whether it be every Marvel movie in the MCU, and then I would go see your Batmans and things like that. And from there, I would say it took a couple of years, but I'm still keeping track of, what's going on in the MCU, anything comic book wise, more so in the mainstream, like not actually physically reading, but more so watching the TV series and watching the movies. Yeah. And from there, I was, I'd have it on Instagram where I'd have, like the Marvel Facts or comicbook.com or the Nerdist. And so I'm seeing all this stuff on comic books. And like I said, it's just my whole life, it's always been there. And also during this time, I would say from in like my 20s as well, I was reading graphic novels, but not more so like Marvel, DC. I was a huge Walking Dead fan, huge fan of the comics. And then it just kept going and going. And then at a point, after the Negan stuff happened, I just kind of stopped. And then I was Y the Last Man, which is a great graphic novel. I haven't watched the show yet that got canceled.
Don't. Horrible.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, don't.
I was on... I was started reading stuff about Y the Last Man again because it popped in my head. Because I talk about that comic series so much. And I just loved it. And... I knew they were doing a show. They announced it like last year or the year prior. Yeah. And then I don't know. I was looking on Google and I was like, I yelled to my fiance. I'm just like, dang, they made the show. Like it was already done. It was already canceled. Yeah. And I haven't watched it yet. And I'm like, it's here. And I read. Okay, stop on my story for a second. I read that they, I thought that the show was good, but they just decided to cancel it, so it wasn't good.
So from what I heard of it was a victim of COVID, where
That's
it was
like
they went to go film it, but the way they had to film it because of COVID restrictions, they couldn't do everything they needed to do to match the comic book. Like obviously you're not going to go one for one for the comic book, but just the scale they were trying to hit, they couldn't do with COVID restrictions, so it ended up just being a garbage show. Oh, no. And so it's like, no, it's dead, and it's just like, there you go. I mean, admittedly, like. Y the Last Man has really weird parts in it that I was gonna say how did they get that in the TV show? But
we've talked about this before. There's so much, like these pop culture shows that are popping up a lot, and I'll be hearing people talk about it at work, or friends will be like, oh, did you check the show? And I was like, oh yeah, I read the graphic novel, and they're like, what are you talking about? Right? Yeah. Is this was the fear? Yeah. Was that it started getting so popular that everybody's just grabbing stuff, and you got something like. That's good, that if done well would have been amazing. People just grabbing it up and just churning it out as quick as they can. And there's so much garbage out there now, even when the content itself should have been amazing.
That's the thing with Y the Last Man. That's a hard one, and I hope they revive it. But it could be. I think it should be a movie, but there's a potential to ruin it with the movie. Yeah, so I don't know.
The problem with that is the time period it spreads is so long. I think it's like 10 years or something like that from start to finish or something.
Because I think there's 6 of the.
I think the really big ones. Yeah.
Yeah, the hefty one. I think there's 6 of them. I could talk about why the
Yeah,
last
I know.
man for a while too, so I won't get
That's
too much
another
into that.
podcast, but yeah.
I was going to talk to you guys about the ending, and I'm like, I didn't even ask you if you guys read it. But anyways, no. So why the last? Actually, I just want to comment on what you were saying with, basically you got Hollywood. Will say, Hollywood, the man, trying to capitalize on nerddom.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Essentially, what is?
Big time.
But the problem is I find is some hit, some miss.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that hit for me are from fans, at least in the slightest, from the behind the scenes, like your directors or your producers or writers from that perspective.
Yeah.
But sometimes they don't hit, even though they're good. I.e., Preacher.
Mm-hmm.
Preacher is a great comic book series.
Yeah.
Seth Rogen and who's his partner?
I don't remember.
I don't remember his name. But anyways, it's Evan something. They made a good show, but it's not like super popular, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's still kind of cool to see because we wouldn't have stuff to argue about and complain about and just talk about if they just hit it out of the park every single time. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. But it's tough now because you've got, like I said, you got the content stuff where people are just snatching it up, and some are bad, some are good because they're just trying to crank it out as fast as they can and grab the bucks that they can. And then you've got some of the stuff that as far as to your point, people producing the stuff, directing the stuff, even acting in it that have no clue what the hell they're doing. It's becoming what I always feared it would become, which is just like a big giant mess because really you just got a bunch of people in there trying to fish for dollars, Eternals.
Essentially, what it is. Yeah. Oh my God.
It's just brutal. It's just like, if you got a comic book, take it to one of these producers because they'll snatch it up and they'll try and make it.
But I mean, it's a supply and demand thing, right? Like
Oh,
what
yeah.
happened with Marvel made billions of dollars, proved that if you do a comic book thing well, you'll make lots of money. And so people just get in this mode of like, I'll watch anything that's a comic book or superhero or anything like that, and it's just what happened, right? So,
Well, and then with the Eternals, the crappy part about that, and we had talked about this at work, is they were labeling it as like the next big Marvel movie, which now they're doing with Doctor Strange, which could be a possibility.
Yeah.
But when I watched the Eternals, what did I tell you? All I said was, I think it was Eternals trash. It was so bad. Yeah. I could not. I gave it an hour of just my undivided attention, and after that, I was on my phone. I couldn't do it. I just could not do it. Shang-Chi was really good, though. I liked that a lot.
That was a good one.
That was a good one. Before we get too off topic here, not off topic, but like in the weeds, Dave, so Trey's not talking the whole time. Were you a big wrestling guy?
Big.
Huge. Big? Oh,
yeah.
really?
In two genres.
Okay.
Two eras.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Two eras.
Were you Attitude Era?
No, that was the second era that I got into. First one was like back old school wrestling. I was the hugest fan of Randy Macho Man Savage.
One of my all-time.
Loved him. There's a guy that does an amazing impression of if Randy Macho Man Savage had landed the role of Voldemort in Harry Potter. It's amazing. And then once you got past that era, some of those guys started getting a little older. I kind of filtered off a little, and then when you had the Monday Night Wars with Nitro and Raw. I was Chris Jericho.
Really?
I love Chris Jericho.
Guess what? Just watched him tonight on All Elite Wrestling, which is not WWE.
I love Chris Jericho.
Yeah.
He was hands down my favorite. I was so glad he was the first Universal Champion.
Undisputed, sorry.
And he was fantastic. I even caught the WWF at the time a couple times down at the Stampede. Got to see like Hulk Hogan live and some of these guys live. It was great. It always killed me because back then it was some of these guys were a little rough because they get in, they have their match, and then you could obviously the cameras are off because then the guy just pop right back up and just walk off down the aisle, and they do a much better job now. But no, it was I was huge.
Oh, really?
Me and a buddy of mine we watched it all the time. Legion of Doom was the tag team we both played.
Oh man, I don't
It's so
know.
crazy. Chris
Like
Jericho's still wrestling to this day.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. We used to beat the crap out of each other in the basement. We'd put on wrestling tournaments. Powerbomb my brother into a cement floor once.
Jeez.
Yeah, I've got a pile driver.
He's probably listening to this right now.
Yeah. He's feeling it now. Yeah, it's phantom pains.
Yeah.
That's funny. I had no idea. It is interesting to think though that like wrestling is a weird amalgamation of like buff dudes with nerds. It's like the
It's all, especially now.
Oh yeah.
It's all over the place, man. Like, you have your wrestlers who are wrestlers. They're getting in there. They're technicians. They're doing different holds. Then you got the over-the-top characters, the, quote-unquote sports entertainers like a Chris Jericho. Those type of characters definitely have, like, that comic nerd. There was also a wrestler who, he was not a big wrestler, but he's a friend of one of the biggest tag teams in the world, the Young Bucks. His name's Brandon, and his whole character when he came into AEW was that he played Dungeons and Dragons. Literally, that was it.
Character.
His shirt was a die and a dragon
Yeah.
on it, and it just said his name. It was I don't know his last name. It was Brandon something.
But it lends to all the same thing. It's just like it's like whether it's comic books, Dungeons and Dragons, wrestling, whatever it is. It gives you that. It's like you switch off. Reality is parked over here, and you're all in on this.
Yeah.
And it's all about larger than life characters, stories. All these kinds of things that really, if you break it down to the finite things, they're all the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's just stories. Things that are impossible or you think are impossible.
Yeah. But sometimes relate to.
Yeah, absolutely
Relatable. Yeah. Another question I had for you regarding what was it? No, I can't remember what it was. I had it in my head, and then you talked about wrestling more. That's all I can think about. Oh, so cartoons. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is it's very interesting for me to talk to Dave in the sense of like, I grew up with so many things that I just took for granted. And then he was just like, we never had that when I was a kid. Like, for example, you had like Super Friends. And like,
that was even later in life.
Oh, really? But like you and I grew up with like X-Men 90s series and like Batman animated series and all that stuff. And like I
had He-Man and what's the other one? Tiger Cats.
Oh yeah, Thundercats.
Or Thundercats.
Thundercats.
Yeah, I can't even remember the name. Things like that. That was the shit that we grew up on.
It's just fascinating because like again, it's one of those things I never realized because one of the things I always think about because it comes up a lot is did you know like when you were growing up Green Goblin was always Norman Osborn, correct? Just apparently that wasn't a thing for like 30 years. Like they didn't reveal that when he first got introduced. It was like a build up for like 20 years.
I did not know that.
Yeah. I just grew up knowing, it's Norman Osborn, man. But then it's like, he always tells me all the time about like the build up to who it was just like insane.
The slow burn back in the day was so much better. Like now it's like they just like it's missing big time. And guys, like when they killed the Green Goblin, he stayed dead for years. Like Norman Osborn was dead for years and years and years. There were like 3 other people that took on the mantle, but he was dead for years. And then they just brought him back out of nowhere.
Isn't that crazy?
And that's what
that
made
is
it
so crazy.
Awesome. Because now it's like a guy that's in a comic book run, and they kill him off on issue 10, and then you get into the next run, which is like 2 years later with some other author, and they're like, well, I wanted to work with that character, so they bring him back. And it's just a constant repeat. It's really
which is cool. The thing is you speaking about that. I'm trying to recall the last time I went to the comic book store. Grab the comics. Every week you go in and grab the new comic. It's been a long, probably like before high school, but before I fell off of comics was probably the last time I did that. Because now I just find I'm not gonna collect. I collect a lot of stuff. I don't need the issues to collect them. I just want to read them.
Yeah.
So I have no problem with just buying the compendiums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that's what the big ones are called.
Yeah, or graphic novels.
Yeah.
Or you mean the really big ones?
The big boys, but all going all over the place.
Yeah.
I know there's different names for them too, but
it's all good. So a couple other base questions for you. Favorite superhero?
Okay, I was gonna say the first thing that popped in my head. I don't know. We would not label this person as a superhero. Depending. Magneto has always been like my favorite all around, just comic book character.
Cool.
I don't know why, but when I was a kid, the thought of manipulating metals was just so cool to me. And then moving on as I like figured out and started learning about the backstory that he had as they kept going. I mean, House of M. I'll talk to you.
Amazing.
I loved it. So Magneto's always been my number one. As for like superhero, I would have to say it's a toss-up between Spider-Man.
Score one for Dave. I mean, the third most popular superhero in the world. It's a good chance.
And again, I trouble with this one because like, when I think of superhero, I think of like a Spider-Man, a Hulk.
Yeah,
I want to say like the Punisher was always.
Dude, Punisher's rad.
Yeah, right. Like he was always the cool one.
Yeah.
You know, and I was big into Daredevil too. Like I liked the darker side of Marvel, right? I mean, now it's darker all across the board, pretty much, depending on what you're reading. But I was just really really big into Spider-Man since I was a kid. And if you like asked me this when I was like 12 years old, which would be really weird, I would be Cyclops though. Like I told you about the toy I had, I really did like.
We have not started interviewing 12-year-olds.
I think that's good. I don't know if you want to brand that.
No, don't want to brand it, but I do think we'd get some interesting responses.
Oh yeah, it would be a funny.
Well, we talk about all our time trying to get our nieces and nephews into comic books, so maybe that's one day. Maybe we'll think about it.
Yeah, my niece is like hardcore into manga. Like hardcore into manga.
Yeah. Which one day we're going to do a manga podcast. I'm trying to force Dave to do a manga podcast one day, so we'll get there.
I don't think I've ever read manga.
No?
Maybe Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah,
does that count?
It's manga style, but it's written Canadian, so it's written by Canadians, so it's like debatable, but it is manga style. Dave, was there ever a time in your life when you weren't reading comics, that you took a break or
every month?
Every month?
Yeah, I get restarted every month.
You're like, I'm gonna stop. You know.
Well, the way my comics come in now is monthly, so I get them. At the end of the month. So I stop until they come in, and then I start up again.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time? Yeah, there was. There was a time when I didn't It wasn't full stop. It was more of a transition. I went from. They were doing some what I felt was like beyond what you see now, like just super childish things in Marvel that I just couldn't get, right. And it was coming on the heels of the Clone Saga and right around like Spider-Man and stuff. Like it was just bad. It was really bad stuff, and it was right around that time it was probably 90s-ish is when it really started. When you saw all of those artists and creators leave and go start Image.
Oh, yeah.
And
so early 90s.
I dumped Marvel like a sack of hammers and went over to Image, and I was collecting everything from Image. Youngblood, Wildcats, Cyberforce, like the whole works. And, art, fantastic. Some of the stories were like, oh, this kind of seemed like rehashed from an X-Men comic or something. Yeah. Some of the characters seem like that. But
I wonder why.
But yeah, I dropped all that, including Spider-Man.
Really?
Stopped collecting anything Marvel and was just on the Image train.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I think my uncle did the same thing, because I remember getting, this was 2001, I remember getting a big box of comics from him, and they were all Image.
Oh, yeah.
They were just all Image comics. And so, as you were talking, I never read one of them, though. But the funniest thing is I still have that box, so it could still happen. But as you were, listing off the names, couldn't tell you a storyline to save my life.
Yeah.
But, I just imagine the covers were just very eye-popping.
Oh, yeah.
And, the visuals, the actual artistry was really nice, but I don't know anything about the story.
So that was about it. Because you had all the at the time, McFarlane was doing Spider-Man, and he was the shit. That was the guy that everybody was following. You had Jim Lee, who was doing the X-Men, and he left. You had Silvestri. You had these the top of the top artists just all walk out and start their own thing. And at that time, I think they just I feel like it happened right at the right time because the stories were getting sour, the comics weren't great,
Yeah.
and then you just took away the only thing that really kept some people reading them, which was these amazing, fantastic artists, and they all left. So that was probably the closest I've ever come to like quitting comics. Was I just switched comics?
That's pretty funny.
But how long were you on Image for? Because you were talking about kind of the storylines as well. Was that something? Did you realize the importance of a storyline in comics?
Not as much like back then. I think it was more about the artist, how cool it looked, that kind of stuff. Like as far as the Image stuff, like McFarlane's Spawn, good storyline ish. Like it was just really deep and dark and weird, and it just wasn't necessarily my thing. The art was fantastic.
Yeah.
I really liked Jim Lee's Wildcats. Was really cool. The whole dynamic that they had, with what they had going on there with Youngblood and Mr. Liefeld who can't draw wrists or ankles. Sorry, Rob. Like you listen to this.
Yeah, he loves it.
But it was just like. There weren't a lot of stories there, but there was. I think that's where I started to really get into the story, because Jim Lee, wrote some of the Wildcats, so it was like this is actually pretty good. And then he did Divine Right, which was awesome as well. Co-creator of a whole bunch of other things like Gen 13 and a whole bunch of other Stormwatch and whatnot through Image, and there were just like good concepts and good ideas, and there were some interesting characters and then that's where I started paying more attention to that, and became more okay. Hey, who wrote this?
Yeah,
versus who drew it.
So basically, what you're saying is, not only did Jim Lee you love his art, you also love his writing.
I just love Jim Lee.
You just love Jim Lee.
Yeah.
Jim Lee's out there. He's just like Dave restraining order man.
Oh, definitely.
That's so funny. So what got you back into Marvel then?
Back into Marvel.
Yeah.
I think it was probably something like. There was probably an event. I can't remember it. Like I can't pinpoint it down.
No.
But there was probably some kind of an event that was going on. Like whether it was, it wasn't because it was certainly well before then. But something like a House of M or something like that was just big. And I was like, what's going on? And then just kind of started reading it and checking it out. And then I was like, do you know what? Like, I'm still a huge big fan of Spider-Man. The movies were just coming out and whatnot, and you were like, oh. So I started getting back into it slowly. You picked up the ones that I was always fans of: X-Men, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and then I was like, screw it. I like this stuff. There's actually some good stuff here. So then it just the door kicked open, and I was like, Thor, Avengers, Fantastic Four, like anything.
Yeah, it just goes wild.
Yeah.
Trey, favorite comic book movie? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The
hardballs.
Yeah.
There are only wrong answers.
Everyone's the wrong answer.
You know what? It's really hard coming off of No Way Home to give you that answer. It's really hard because for me, I have not stopped thinking about that movie since I saw it. I just really liked it.
Yeah.
But I would say before that, probably Captain America: Winter Soldiers. It's up there for me.
Good movie.
Captain America: Winter Soldier, Thor Ragnarok's up there.
Yep.
Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one.
Yeah.
I love it how everybody always has to preface the first one.
Hey, I like the second one.
It wasn't bad. It was fun.
No,
it was fun.
Yeah, it didn't hold up to the first one.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which was a tall order.
Yeah. Well, the first one had such low expectations versus the second one.
Most people were like, "We're the Guardians of the Galaxy."
Yeah. Even I was like, I don't know who you are. Yeah, it's good times. So you have taste. It's good to hear. The one thing though that I know Trey likes that I know you and I hate. He likes the Suicide Squad.
Oh, really?
I was just about to talk about that. The first one. The first one they did with Will Smith.
Wait, the first one or the James Gunn one?
Oh, I love both of them. Different reasons. Yeah.
Try to convince us why it's good.
Well, we have different tastes. Then I'm fine if you guys don't like it. But
it's all subjective.
But before you start, I'm not convinced.
Start there. Yeah.
The big thing for me with the first Suicide Squad, Will Smith, Jared Leto,
Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie is a big part about that. I don't know about you guys, but I don't see another person playing Harley Quinn now. I think she's kind of cemented herself as that person. So it was cool to see that on top of, it was just a fun movie to me. Like, I can't recall what came out in that year or like what I saw that year, but I just remember when I initially saw it, I read everyone hated it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I went to go see it. My big takeaways were Jared Leto sucks as Joker.
Yeah.
He played other movies, get out of the comic book. Well, he's back in now.
Morbius.
Yeah, Morbius looks pretty cool. But the big thing, Jared Leto sucks. Margot Robbie's a good Harley Quinn. Will Smith was meh. This movie's just fun to me. Oh, and Cara Delevingne playing...
Enchantress.
Yeah, Enchantress was awful.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of times in the movie.
Positives here.
But the big thing for me is like when they were all together.
Yeah.
I just felt it was fun. Like I felt like it was a little funny, just with the concept of the Suicide Squad. It's dark, but it is kind of silly and funny as well. I don't know. He probably did not convince you guys, but I thought it was a really fun movie, and I stand on that. Like I've watched it a couple times.
Like I have to say, I enjoy, like if I was sat down like tied to a chair and forced to watch either the first one or the second one, I'd watch the first one.
Thing is, the second one is really good to me.
Yeah, I did not like the second one.
So the thing with the second one was I felt that like cool, fun vibe of the first one. James Gunn enhanced it, and plus he tried to appeal more to comic book fans by having these obscure characters come in, even if most of them died within. I mean, spoiler alert if you've seen it. It's been a year.
It's all good.
But yeah, even though most of them died pretty quickly, I thought it was good. I thought the storyline, it was basic, but it was still something that I sunk my teeth into. And I just thought like the direction of the movie was really good. And then Peacemaker, the show, is fucking awesome.
It was funny.
It was super funny.
Funny.
Super fun too. Like it was just
that was what caught me. I did not like the James Gunn Suicide Squad.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like that. And then we sat down with my wife who does not like like gory violence or anything like that, and watched Peacemaker, and it was like, oh, we got to watch the next one. And in fact, she was the one that was like, hey, we should watch that again. Watch the next one and the next one. And it was like one of these strange shows that was like nothing about it that I was just like, this is amazing, but I just couldn't stop watching it for whatever the hell we were doing with it. It was just bizarre.
Yeah, and I wouldn't put like the movies on this high pedestal of like all-time greats.
Yeah.
It's just, for me personally, they were fun movies. And Peacemaker was just like, it's been a while since I've watched a show every single week, and that was a show I just really liked. And John Cena just made the Peacemaker popular.
Yeah.
Like John Cena. Think of, we're talking wrestling and comic books with me, that's just, it kind of just went hand in hand.
Yeah, which is fair. Yeah. No, I don't know. It just didn't vibe. And it's one of those things where it's like, because you watch Guardians 1, you watch Guardians 2, so you're like, oh, I like James Gunn, I like his comedy and whatnot. And then you get into the Suicide Squad, and it's like, I feel like he needs to be reined in a little bit. But again, it's all subjective. So, and we've done a whole podcast on it. So.
Oh, did you? You talked about all those Suicide Squad? Oh,
you didn't listen to it?
No, I did not listen to it.
Listen to all the podcasts before you come on. Come on.
Sorry,
Maybe he doesn't want to listen to it.
No.
It wasn't very favorable.
Now that he's on, he will. Yeah.
I mean, probably. And the fact that you're trying to roast me on it, I would give it a shot.
Yeah, fair. Sounds fine. That sounds good. Yeah. No, any other questions you got?
Yeah, for me, I think it's, when it comes to, the comic books that you're kind of reading now as somebody getting kind of like back into it, is it like, do you find yourself kind of sticking to those, like the main guns, like the the Spider-Mans, the ones that are popular? You always see them. They got the movies, they got the TV shows, they got the cartoons, they got everything, video games, you name it, they've got it. Or are you starting to find yourself kind of going like, ooh, who's this guy over here?
A little bit of both, honestly.
And if there is, who's that guy?
Well, funny enough, Moon Knight right now, actually. It's funny because it's coming. The show's coming out. We're like literally next week.
Next week.
Yeah. Next week.
30th.
I don't even think I finished my long-winded rants about my journey back in the comics. Honestly, well, no, it connects, right? Because So like during that time period, you know, when I was talking about getting back into wrestling, I still started dabbling into the other things that you would, you know, just most would be put into the nerd bin, basically. And comics was that, and I started getting back into it. And the big ones that brought me back, like around my mid-20s, was House of M, Civil War, Annihilation. What else did I read? I read a bunch of them, and then you know how they kind of had like the main arc, and then they had the offshoots. Yep. I read all of them.
Dang,
and
he was committed.
Bought all of them. It was just fun. It was just so invested. And then I kind of fell off a bit, just staying into my graphic novels, you know, more so of like, you know, those Walking Dead. I want to say realistic, but that's not the case. Just outside of like the superhero comics is what I was focusing more so on. Preacher. And then honestly, I would probably say my commitment back into comics started in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. I just started buying a bunch of issues. I went into my grandma's attic and grabbed a bunch of my old comics and just started reading them again. And from there, I just felt like it's just kind of taken off. And I think even more so, I don't want you to have an ego about this, but I think Greg has helped too, because when he introduced me...
Greg and help in the same sentence.
Yes, I know.
Come on, guys.
It really pained me to say that. But he told me about the Marvel U, and I have not been able to put it down. I'm super into it. And so going back off what you're saying, it's a little bit of both. I have been dabbling like with Moon Knights, went into Hawkeye with the run. Who wrote it?
Matt Fraction.
And this was after I watched the Disney Plus, and obviously the comic to me was better. But but other than that, it's been Spider-Man. So I went to Ultimate Spider-Man, which I read when I was a kid, and oh boy, am I just loving it. Like, I just love it. I'm like, this was made when I was a kid. Like, this is just so good. Like, I'm just so into it. And you're talking about, too, how it's kind of... how we've stopped. Everything could be consumed so easily, right? So it's the long arcs. Yeah. You don't get that. You know, you have to wait a couple. Oh, someone dies, it affects you. You have to wait a couple of years. And I've noticed that because what I've done is like I went to count how many Ultimate Spider-Mans there were, like how many issues. Yeah. And I was looking at the years, and I'm crushing it, like because I have it all there. Yeah. And I'm like, I was trying to imagine, which is really hard, of like going through this. Like you're waiting every month, and sometimes a character doesn't come back. Like for instance, just off the top of my head, like when Gwen Stacy died, like that must have been huge at that time. But that's not something that I can relate to, right? So it's even weird. Like even consuming it so much now, I feel like there's excitement, but it's different, right? Like it's not with the storyline; it's just more so. It is, but it's just because you're taking it in as opposed to, you know, waiting and having that period. It's hard to describe, but it's like a TV show, like what I'm saying, like with episodic, like catching it every week. You don't have time to let it sink in, so you're consuming it so quickly, I feel like it gets lost a little more, right? And which is the down point of it, but for me, catching up, right? I've been just trying to read as many comics as I can. Greg's been giving me lists of the series and certain issues and stuff that I should be reading or certain arcs. Yeah. But it's I want to say it's like a little stressful because for me I'm a perfectionist. You know, in wrestling I know a lot. Yeah. I know a lot of stuff about wrestling, and so getting back into something that I love that I'm not super informed on is a little difficult, right? Like even when you asked to come sit down for the podcast, I'm like, well, I just started getting back into it, man. What do I get it? What am I going to talk about?
Embarrass myself or something?
But that's not so much. I embarrass myself every day. That's not. That's more so just I need to know everything, right? And but it's, you know, what makes comics so great. If you find the right people, it's fun. It doesn't matter, right? Because then you can bounce off each other. It's like, oh, hey, I'm going to go home to my fiance tonight, and I'm going to tell her, did you know that Green Goblin was not known as Norman Osborn for years? Yeah. Like, you know, like just things like that. Like
she's going to be like, please don't talk to me.
You said that, and I got super excited. I'm like, oh, cool, new thing. Put it in the bank, right? Like, Yeah, but it's definitely been a fun ride getting back into it. It's just also with so much content coming out with Marvel, because I'm pretty sure we're all big Marvel fans.
Yeah. How'd you know?
with all the shows coming out, it's a little weird. Like I remember when I was younger and when people started getting into comics, like this is when I was off of it, but people were starting to get into it because Avengers came out around 2010, I believe it was, and all my friends were talking about Hulk and Iron Man. I was like, do you know who Moon Knight is? You know, and that's serious. Like that's no joke. Like I was reading it as a kid, but I didn't. Yeah. It's so different now, and now it's a show. Yeah. Or like the fact, like I used to also be a huge fan of Scarlet Witch, especially with House of M. Yeah. I just thought she was so just powerful and just I don't know. I was just a huge fan, and then when she showed up in the Avengers, I wasn't as happy because I wasn't really a big fan of the old Olsen sister, whatever. What's her name?
Elizabeth
Olsen, yeah.
She's great.
No, she's good now.
Yeah.
I'm talking more so like Avengers 2.
Yeah,
like,
2014.
Yeah.
When she first announced, nobody knew who she was, right? Yeah.
But now I do like her because obviously WandaVision, that was incredible to me. Yeah. It's just been fun, man. And the shows are fun too. And I like, I just caught up on Loki and Hawkeye. And I mean, I already watched WandaVision, but then I watched What If. Yep. And it's just fun. It's just fun to watch them, and it's cool to see that they're trying different things that appeal more so to comic book fans than bringing it into the mainstream. I feel like with Iron Man and Avengers, that's what they tried to do, and now it's at the point now where comics are just everything. They're cool, right?
They are the mainstream, yeah.
And one thing I didn't mention, and I'm sure maybe you guys have experienced this, but like also too when I was younger, being a pro wrestling fan and a comic book kid, and like also being very lanky and tall, didn't really work out in the schoolyard.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so like, that was another factor too, where it's cool to see that people are just freely doing podcasts on, right? Like everyone's chatting. You can find a community that you can fit in with anywhere on the internet, which is just cool, or like even in general, right? Yeah, so it's just really sweet.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, like you say though. Like it's not just the nerds in their basement anymore, right? Like it's everybody. Like the nerds in the basement are kings type of thing, right? Like could you ever imagine back in like the 80s where like one day
it was a secret society. Like you just knew who was into comics because you'd maybe see them down at the comic book store or whatever, and you knew who they were, but you didn't talk about it in public. And it was all because of that like one guy that did talk about it in public and would like talk about comics and geek stuff, and then you just saw how he got like treated and trounced and beat up and all the various things that you just didn't tell anybody. Like
that's so interesting.
Anybody. It was just if I knew you two collected comics, I'd talk to you, not at school. Like it would be like on the weekend. Maybe we were at the comic book store, but it just wasn't a thing.
That's so interesting.
It was crazy too. I remember being a wrestling fan, which sparked my interest in wrestling in the Attitude Era. Yeah, it was all the rage in my elementary and junior high. Mm-hmm. But then like halfway through junior high, it wasn't cool anymore. It was definitely not cool anymore. Oh, it's fake. It's fake. And then if you were a wrestling fan, like in high school, that's why I dropped it. Right? Like that's just how it went.
I've never had an issue with that. And I don't know why. I think it's just one of those things where it's like I was just always surrounded by nerds, so there was no bully, or anything like that. And so it's or maybe there were a couple kids who were kind of assholes in my class, but I was always willing to fight them, type of thing. Yeah. Like to go like I love comics. I don't care what you think about me, and then just kind of shut it down, type of thing. So like I never run into that issue of like, oh, it's not cool anymore, I don't want to do it. I'd always be like, yeah, I love comic books. You also want to go play football? Type of thing. Like, I was very able to kind of mix between different groups of people. But it is interesting to think now. Like,
it took me 30 years to get to that point, Greg.
Yeah, we'll try it sometime. No, it is interesting to hear other people's, perspective, because it does put it into light. Because, like, it's one of those things where it's like, again, mine is a very different case than most people. Most people were very, segregated from society for liking nerd stuff, right? It's I don't care.
And that's why, like, I just felt like everyone has, like, it's more common for people to have those stories, at least, probably before being a millennial. Like, nowadays, you can like whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Like Deadpool and all these.
That's
people.
why you'd get excited if you were like talking to somebody and they were like I just I read comics. What? Oh my god! Like there's like a kinship here, and now it's like when somebody says like, oh, I read comics, like yeah, whatever. It's like
everybody does.
Everybody does. You're like, oh, I watch the movies.
You know what? The other thing that probably influenced me a lot too is actually one of my biggest influences when I was a kid for comics was my dad. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where it's just like it was always a part of my life growing up, so it just never was a segregated thing that you keep hidden, right? Because like I'm not sure if you guys had that, but yeah, I just had an adult figure that was positive for me, right? So
no, I mean thinking back on it, my mom read a lot. Like she read a lot of novels, mostly like Stephen King stuff like that. My dad certainly not, a nerd in any way, shape, or form. Old hippie that just never got anything like that from him. As far as like sports, like he was a big sports guy, so we always spent a lot of time watching sports, talk about sports, or whatever. But I think what shocked me one day was when I come across on the shelf and going through some of like his old stuff, because you start rummaging through your parents' crap sometimes, and I come across this book set, and I'm like, what the hell is this? It's like Lord of the Rings.
What?
And I'm like, who the hell is this, right? So immediately I thought like, oh, it's mom's because it's a book.
Yeah.
So I go and ask her, and it's like, oh no, that's your dad's. And I went to him and was like, hey, like, what is this all about? And I was huge into mythology and all that kind of stuff. I just love this stuff. And with this, it was just like that fantasy realm, which was just like, you got mythology and all this other stuff, and then you got like fantasy just kind of ramps it up. Yeah. And he's like, no, you can't read those. And I was like, oh, okay. And then like 2 days later, he comes back and he gives me The Hobbit.
Oh,
and he's like, you got to read this first, right? So that was about as close as nerdiness. Now I can't ever figure out, because I was like comic books, D&D, video games, and my dad just never cared. I think my parents during the like satanic panic may have grabbed a D&D book to look in it to make sure we weren't like worshiping Satan or whatever. Looked at it and went, okay, this is like a bunch of goofy math, so here, go at her. And they just let us fly. So I was lucky in that regard. Like, and it was never promoted, but it was we were never restricted from getting into that stuff. And as it started to build, my comic pile started to grow. I never had any of my parents come in and say, get rid of this shit. You're too old for that. Mm-hmm. They just left it alone.
Yeah, my mom was the same way, honestly. Like, because I had never had any. It was just me and my mom, so I just never had any influence. She was just working so much. It was just kind of a natural thing. Like, I think with wrestling, growing up as younger in the 90s with around the Attitude Era, like even babysitters and stuff were super into it. So I had that, I guess, to kind of at least have someone to watch it with. But yeah, no, I never really honestly had friends who were like into nerdy stuff until my mid-20s.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're such a nerd. No, just kidding.
But like the thing too is I also am really big into UFC.
Yeah.
I do jiu-jitsu. I play basketball. I like do all this. I collect shoes. Like I'm very eclectic across the board. Mm-hmm. So I kind of could talk to anyone about anything, at least a little bit of it.
Do you remember Community? They had the D&D episode.
Yeah, one of the best.
All my brother-in-laws loved it. They thought it was amazing type of thing. So they're like, Greg, you know what? And these are like oil field, like welders and like electricians and all that stuff. Greg, let's do D&D. So they got me to do a D&D session with them. The entire time we're doing the session, they're just like, man, I would have beaten my ass in high school if I had known how to D&D. It's so funny. But again, it's one of those things where it's like nerddom is just so universally accepted now that it's
now
just
it's just so cool. Like my fiance, she met me when I was started collecting, and now I have close to 500 just wrestling figures. I also have Marvel Legends and all these other weird figures around the house, and she still wants to marry me. So like you can see how it's more accepted now. Like even my mom or my grandmother, if they visit me, and when I lived in Lloydminster, my one room was just full. Like we just called it my office, but it was just my nerd room. Yeah. And it was full, the wall everywhere was just figures. And I had them all in their series, and they were mint all across. And my mom came over with my grandmother to visit, and they were just like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Neat. Yeah. Probably pretty expensive, but cool.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's it. Like, it's just so accepted now that it doesn't matter. And my mom is a huge, like, she would probably say she's a huge comic. Oh, I'm going to roast her right now.
Okay.
So my mom actually has a Marvel sleeve.
Really?
It's very well done. It has the Hulk. It has the Punisher.
Wow.
It has Iron Man. My mom has probably never read a comic book in the past since she was a kid in the 70s.
Wow.
She loves the movies.
Yeah.
She just really loves the movies and TV shows. Yeah. And so she got a sleeve. And I rip on her every time I do it because I still got to have a little bit of that, like, superiority of being like a nerd. And she would, like, send me a picture. Ooh, got a new part of it. I'd be like, name that person. Anyways, you know what I mean? Just being a real dick to her. But no, it's just cool to see. You know, like, I actually don't care. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah. And I think that just shows how, like you were saying, how universally loved kind of the nerdom is. But the problem I do have with it is, like, all these people who used to, like I've literally seen on Facebook people who used to bully me for it, who are, like, super into it now and, like, have tattoos on it now. And that pisses me off. But other than that, I don't really care because I know in true life I can beat them up. So that's I'm just kidding.
Just go to their house with a locker, get in the locker. It's like, you owe me. You know,
man, when I was a kid, I was not built like this. No. Like, I was tall, but I was slanky.
Yeah,
I looked like an alien. I was skinny fat. So, like, I had, like, the muffin top, but I was just, like, super duper skinny, so I got made fun of all the time.
That's
and then
so
on top of that, I'm a nerd. But everyone also wanted to be my friend, which is weird, because I was the tall kid. So it would be, like, the quote-unquote, like, popular kids would, like, have me around, but I'd be, like, the punching bag, essentially. Really? Yeah. Not literally. No, I'm not fighting people, but, like they, you know, beaking me and roasting me. Yeah.
See, this is what happens when you live on the north side of Edmonton.
Yeah, I grew up in, like, a pretty bad neighborhood in Edmonton.
I mean, that is one of the things that drives me nuts. It's not so much like people getting into it, you know, because, I mean, I remember having my own insecurities about it, like not wanting people to know. I don't know if, like, you know, behind closed doors these guys, like, you know, liked it, and maybe they read comics. I just didn't know because I just didn't want to say anything. But what I can't stand is when I'm sitting in a theater and I got Joe Blow in front of me talking to his girlfriend, trying to impress her with a bunch of information about, you know, the comic or the character that we're about to see, and he's just all wrong. And it just infuriates me to no end, because it's just like, okay, I can accept the fact that this geeky thing that was part of my life for a long time, that I had to hide, is now something that other people are picking up. Okay, I can let that go. But then when you're using it to impress a girl and you're wrong, shit. Oh,
at least give her the right details.
Only once in a theater did I have to tell a guy he was wrong. Yeah, because it was a Spider-Man movie. Yeah, and the guy was just so wrong, and I had to lean forward. And I was like, I don't know who you are, but
hate you.
You're gonna get a bunch of information right now you're not gonna like.
Okay, what was it? What did he get wrong? Do you remember?
He was talking about it was the difference. I think it was in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and they were talking about like he was filling her in, hit or miss about some stuff, and I think he was getting some stuff mixed up with, like, maybe he heard or understood a little bit of, like, Ultimate Spider-Man versus, like, regular Spider-Man, which wasn't a big deal. We don't let that go. But then he started going off about how, like, oh, this movie's not right because, you know, it was Mary Jane is the one that Spider-Man was always in love with, and, you know, and he was just going off on this, like, just giant tangent, like he was angry about it, like, oh, they got it wrong. And I'm just like, I was so mad I had to lean forward and just let him know, like, actually, Gwen Stacy is the one that he dated first. Yeah, would have married, and they probably would have kids, and, you know, the whole works, depending on the storyline. I said, and then she died, and then he didn't get together with Mary Jane until, like, much later.
Wait, did you say this to him at Amazing Spider-Man 2? Because that would have been funny. If he like actually didn't know, and
It
then
may,
Gwen Stacy died,
it may have been.
That
May have been number
hilarious.
2. All I know it was an amazing because his comparison was the old movies with Tobey Maguire. The old movies, had it right because she was like his love, and that was her. And then they just they had to change it up, and he's just like spitballing bullshit the whole time. Like they had to change it up, and they had to bring her in, and then he was talking about like hot hair dye and shit, and, like because she's redhead, like it was just nonsense, and I was not in the mood for it, and I just thought, you know what, no, I'm gonna ruin this, and
then he got with his girlfriend.
he's not gonna see this girl a second time because I'm gonna make this a mess.
That's so funny.
So, but generally I keep my mouth shut, but it is one of the more irritating things that I find in the theater now is when I'm listening to people just get it wrong. Like, it's okay to get it wrong. Get it wrong, but are acting or thinking they're getting it right.
Yeah, that's the point.
I can't stand that. I don't go to a Batman movie, which I don't know like a ton about Batman. I know enough.
Yeah.
But I don't go into Batman and start talking shit about Batman. Yeah. Because I know if I liked Batman and I was sitting behind me, I would be infuriated, and I hate that. Yeah. It drives me nuts.
That's definitely actually that happened at Spider-Man No Way Home. There was a group. I was by myself, and my fiance had to work, and I'm like, I'm not waiting for you. I'm going to see it.
I gotta go.
And there were a group of dudes. They were definitely like in high school behind me, and they were. I don't recall really what exactly they were saying that was making me mad. But they were just talking about Marvel as a whole, and then one of them said how they liked what did they say? It was Winter Soldier and Falcon, like the
TV show.
The TV show,
yeah.
And I think that's just where like I went red, and I was like, how?
That's my trigger word.
Yeah, they were just talking about, but it wasn't that bad. But I have got to that point, like even with wrestling too, when you're sitting in lines.
Yeah.
Every wrestling fan thinks they know everything about wrestling, including myself.
Yeah.
So, like, when you're standing in line and someone's just like, you know what? Bret Hart wasn't that good. And then it's just like, what the fuck?
Table.
Shawn Michaels was actually better than Bret Hart. Go crazy.
Have you ever been to a comic book convention or fan expo or anything like that?
I've been to a bunch of expos.
Okay.
Like all the ones in Edmonton.
Yeah, good times.
There's a couple I probably missed. I went to Calgary to actually get a signature from Chris Jericho.
Nice.
Which was really, really cool. And I also, oh my god, I also got a issue signed. I think it was from the writer of Hellboy.
Mike Mignola?
Yeah, I believe he was there, or I'm pretty sure that I was. Yeah, because I really, really, really liked Hellboy too.
Okay, well, if Trey's dead, it's because I killed him for his Mike Mignola signature.
But yeah, no, those are the ones that I've went to. Like I don't know if you guys have been, but I've always wanted to go to San Francisco. I mean, there's other Comic Cons. Like I want to go to like the Comic Con, right?
See, the ones I've been to is just the Edmonton ones. Like,
they're so fun.
They were so fun. I think the thing I like most about it is how small it is. Because then it's like, because you look at the video footage of San Diego and it's like, dude, that's like, especially now that the pandemic's happened, I don't know if I want to be around that many people.
Yeah.
Whereas the Edmonton one, it's like, there usually is a bit of a line if it's like a really popular person. But other times you can just be roaming around and like, oh, there's Pippin from Lord of the Rings just walking by, type of thing. I could reach out and touch him, type of thing. And like I saw the guy who created, I can't remember his first name, but Eastman, the guy who created Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh yeah.
He was just vibing in a booth.
Oh, that's cool.
I was just like, it's him, like I'm breathing the same air as him.
He had like a class or like a speaking engagement, right?
Yep.
Friggin' missed it.
Dude.
I remember I was there that year.
Yeah, it was a good year.
And also the guy that there's one guy in Edmonton that goes to the expo and dresses as Wolverine all the time, an older dude.
He used to work at West Edmonton Mall comic book store.
Oh,
He's
really?
the best. I love that guy.
He was really awesome. Also, I'd like to point out as a note that I said San Francisco, not San Diego for Comic-Con. Yeah. So I just like to say I'm actually a nerd. Please don't take away my badge.
Get out of my house. No, I didn't even notice.
But it's funny that you say it's small. Like on comparison to San Diego Comic-Con, but it's a pretty big venue, and it's just so cool because it does kind of feel like a close-knit like group. Like
Yeah.
every year I went there, even if I'm like not like talking to these people all the time, it's still like I know who they are, and
Yeah.
you could still wave at someone or take pictures with them, and they're cool with it.
Yeah.
You can talk to them about whatever. I went there for like an independent company in Edmonton, and I was doing interviews with just people dressed up in certain costumes. Yeah, this is while I was in school for broadcasting, and man, it was really cool. No one denied an interview. Everyone wanted to talk. I was even doing jokes, and like I was just going up to random people and like playing rock. Like I wouldn't say anything, and I'd be like this, and people would play rock paper scissors with me, and just put my fist out. Like it was just a fun little thing that I was doing on the side while I was in school, and it just really showed how cool the expo is. But I do want to give it a couple of years, but I definitely want to go travel, and
so bad.
go to San Diego or whatever.
I'm hitting Calgary next month.
Yeah?
Yeah,
You're
for
doing
the
it?
Expo. Yeah.
Damn, that's so exciting.
I didn't even see the lineup.
Yeah, who's coming? Who's going?
So far, they don't have much of a lineup in the comic industry.
Oh, okay.
So far, usually they start adding people like come April. Like once you get
and
into
now
the-
like
into the
restrictions
month.
are getting lower.
Yeah, so we'll probably start to see them filtering in, but right now it's Jay and Silent Bob are going to be there.
Really?
Yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah,
I got it. Okay, when is it?
Yeah.
I'm a big Kevin Smith guy.
Yeah, and the three guys from the Clerks movies
okay.
are also going to be there. They got Rucker from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, frick.
He's,
Yondu.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yondu. He's going to be there. They've got, I think their main headlining is they've got, it's an unexpected reunion of the Hobbits. They got
All
four of the
That's
Hobbits.
awesome.
So, yeah, it's gonna be a good time. Just I'm more looking forward. I got to see come on, start adding the comic book, like the artists and the writers and shit in there because I love going around to those now because nobody knows who they are in some cases. So you can just go up and you can have a conversation with them and it's fantastic.
Dave has a picture with Stan Lee.
Yes.
He met Stan Lee. Isn't that insane?
Every time, when I rewatch the movies now and see them, I just
I also have a picture with
Cactus
Mick
Jack.
Foley.
Oh, Mick Foley, yeah.
That's cool too.
Yeah, first and my brother, because my brother's like, I watch wrestling, I was like, but my brother was like, Mick Foley's here. I got the book. I'm gonna get him sign it, like his autobiography. And I was like, okay, so we get in line, we get for the pictures and stuff. We get up there, and first thing my brother says to him, I've never read a book in my life until your autobiography came out. And to that point, I didn't really see him smiling all that much, but he smiled when he heard that because it was just like of all the things you can think of.
So this is really weird. So do you know that he has a stand-up special?
Really?
Like he does a stand-up tour. He tells that as a joke.
No
and
way.
He was in Edmonton a couple years ago. I didn't get a chance to get a picture with him, but in his story, he it's not really stand-up comedy how it usually is.
Yeah.
It's more so just storytelling, and it's funny because it's Mick Foley.
Yeah.
And he tells a story about that at one of his shows.
No freaking way.
So I don't know if that's specific. I mean, there could have been.
He hears it a lot. I don't know.
Yeah, but he said that because he talks about not being a writer and writing the book, and then that happening, and I don't know the punchline. I don't want to ruin it, but he makes some sort of joke about it.
Wow, your brother could be famous for being an idiot. Man, shout out to him.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So as we start to get into the back end of the podcast, really quick question: when you were younger, reading more often, single issues or graphic novels?
When I was younger, it was single issues.
Single issues? Damn.
Yeah.
I'm a graphic novels guy. Dave's a single issues guy. To me, it was so much easier just to go here's $20, give me all 5 Ultimate Spider-Man.
Well, now it's since into my 20s, it's been like that. I don't remember, like I said, the last time I bought an issue. But when I was a kid, definitely, because I wasn't buying them. My mom was. It's cheaper just to buy the
$2. Back when it was $1. Yeah.
She would just grab a bunch of them when she bought all her fitness magazines and threw them on top, and there you go. And then she put an Archie in there for some reason, even though I wasn't a big Archie fan.
Yeah. You don't watch Riverdale? So now, one of the things you kind of hinted at earlier, is the advent of digital comics, especially Marvel Unlimited for us, because this is something that even happened during the pandemic. I mean, we couldn't travel. We don't have a comic book store. The closest one is Grand Prairie, which is 2 hours away, which you can't travel to.
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, there was a drought there for me, for sure. Where I was like, I got nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't read a comic book in a couple months, and it wasn't by choice. But then Dave got into Marvel Unlimited, and then he eventually got me into Marvel Unlimited. So what got you into Marvel Unlimited?
Just the access, the access to stuff. Like I mean, I'm gonna say, I've got a pretty good collection of Amazing Spider-Man, for example. Like, I mean, I've got issues going all the way back to, I think, issue 98, 97.
Wow.
We're on, 800 and something. You can't, once you get to a certain point in collecting comics, especially going back, you hit a roadblock where you're like, okay, now I'm spending like $200-$400 an issue. But I'd like to read it but knowing that you could get on to Marvel Unlimited, sign up, and I could go, okay, shit, I'm going to read Fantastic Four from issue number 1.
Yeah.
Way back when, and just go through all of it. And that's what I liked, was having that access. I got really sick and tired of like the crossover shit, where they would have like Secret Wars, and then they'd have like 8 million friggin' side stories that were going on, and like some of it was in stuff that I don't collect, or I don't, I'd never read before, or didn't read. So I'd be buying all these friggin' things, and some of it was just like crappy writing, Well, this was a great outlet to just be able to go like, okay, I can read it digitally and not have to, buy it. Certainly not taking up room in my house, which is the main concern with my wife.
Yeah.
Is that if the comic books start to expand beyond the room they're in, I might be in trouble. So it was just great to be able to do that.
Yeah.
To be able to go like, hey, I don't read this comic, but it's like it's connected to the storyline that we're reading, so I can just jump over and read it. Right? Plus all that old crap that you just can't get your hands on.
Yeah.
Boom. There you go.
Yeah, so me reading comics, I always had like my main ones that I'm like, I read every single issue. So like my Ghost Rider, my Ultimate Spider-Man, all the Ultimate Universe really. But then what I would do is like I would just go to the library, and Edmonton Public Library is my favorite thing in the entire world. It's the best. And then just go to the graphic novel section and just pick random graphic novels, because I like most of them are garbage. It was like, I'm never reading this again, but at least it was,
they're a little ripped on the spine.
Yeah, exactly,
and stuff.
right?
I
That type
remember
of thing.
that too, yeah.
And it's just one of those things where it's just like, just consume an insane amount of comics, and it's, again, most of them are garbage, but I was able to just, it looked interesting, let's try it out.
Yeah.
But then what happened was, move away from Edmonton, don't have the library system, so then, I tried Fort St. John, just not as good. So then I'd go to the comic book store, and I'd accidentally drop, a couple $100 on just random graphic novels. And it's like, well, I wanted to try it out, but then it turned out it was garbage, type of thing. And it's like, I just wasted $20 type of thing. So like what I found was Dave was like, try it out. I was always hesitant on digital because I didn't like the way it worked. I tried Comixology back when it first released.
Yeah.
It was like 2010 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit rough. Maybe that's just, it was first released, right? So I was a little bit hesitant on that. But then Dave got me into the Marvel Unlimited. He's like, just try it out. And like you said, the nice thing about it is you could just, obviously there's you pay for it, but you can just read an infinite amount of comic books if you want, if you have the time and you wanted to, right? And like it allowed me to read comics where it's like, I'm not willing to spend $20 on you, but I want to know what happens in case it's good.
Yep.
And then you can read it. And there's also the ones that's like, man, I've been looking for this comic for like 5 years and I've never found it. Finally, I can read it. Oh, it was garbage the whole time, type of thing. So like and like I said in the beginning of this conversation was, the pandemic, couldn't go to I still didn't read the ones I was collecting. So like Immortal Hulk, I didn't read on Marvel Unlimited. I'm like, I'm gonna wait. I gotta wait for that stuff. But I did start reading like, I started reading like Matt Fraction, Hawkeye, which I probably wouldn't have read without Marvel Unlimited, and like Al Ewing on Loki, and like the just stuff. And we even did a podcast on all the crossover events. I had to catch up on all the crossover events and read them all, which would have been insane.
You don't have to go drop, like you said, $200 on a bunch of graphic novels to get caught up on something. Just D&D or
Marvel Unlimited.
Marvel Unlimited. You just go in, read whatever you need to read.
Yeah.
Skip whatever you want to skip. It's good.
And I will say,
sorry, I was gonna say it's $30.
Yeah.
And like if you're a fan, you like right now with me catching up, it's all there. It's nice, right?
Like it depends on how, like obviously like the value of it will change depending on how much you read, right?
Yeah.
Like again, if you're reading like worth of graphic novels in like a month, then yeah, of course it's worth it, type of thing. It's like you're only reading one a year, then it's not worth it. But if you're reading a crap ton, it's definitely worth it. And then the other thing I found really interesting about it was just I never really read up to date stuff because I read graphic novels and because I didn't have money all the time for it. Sometimes I'd be like 2 years behind stuff. So like I'm actually reading stuff where I'm waiting a week for like, oh, what's going to happen in the next issue? I've never had that to me before, where it's like I'm actually waiting for the thing on because it's not available. It's like because Marvel Unlimited does have a bit of a delay.
Yeah,
I think it's like 2 months or something like that.
Yeah, there are a couple issues depending on what the production rate is.
Yeah.
For like a comic like Amazing Spider-Man, which is done I think like 3 times a month. You're behind like six issues, 7 issues, something like that. For a regular comic, like 2 issues, 3 issues tops.
Yeah. So it is interesting being current with what's currently happening. So I find that pretty interesting. So what do you like about Marvel Unlimited?
Well, first off, I don't think I'll get to the point where I'm like catching up every week, like waiting for it for a long time. Yeah. And that's the I love it because of the access. It can be a little daunting for me just based off the fact that I'm trying to catch up, right? Like, but at the same time, I'm having fun and it's all there. Yep. Like. I'm crushing through Ultimate Spider-Man right now.
Yeah.
And I think there's like 100 and...
There's like 30 graphic novels, so times 5 is like 150.
Yeah, around there. So and I'm crushing through them, but I'm taking breaks to go read other issues, right? Like it's just cool that everything's there where I could just, okay, I'm going to take a break from this. Let's go to Moon Knight and see kind of what I want to read. I just think it's really cool that it's also not just... like we said, the mainstays right now, like the mainstream ones, like your Spider-Man's, Hulks, and you can go to a Moon Knight, a Ghost Rider, some of these characters that aren't as popular, and you can really, sink your teeth into, especially if it's maybe a character that you're not used to. Oh, hey, well, I don't need to go pay all this money. It's similar to, some of these offshoots to a big arc going on. Oh, okay, I can... read this character without having to spend all this money, right? Like, and just test it out, which is really cool as well. One thing I don't like about it, and I don't know if you guys have this problem, but I'm having a real big problem of it tracking like what I've read and the ones that I want to save and stuff like I wish that was better.
Yeah.
But I know where I'm at, so I just kind of go there. And they do have the red bar at the bottom if you read it. That still shows up, but where it says like continue reading or like the ones you saved, that always messes up for me. But other than that, like it's just a small thing. Something that will probably
it's a user interface thing.
Yeah. But the fact that all these comics are there and like, hey, I can go back to the early days of Spider-Man, even though I might not have as much fun reading it, I still could. It's there, and the possibilities there. One day I'm like, screw it, I'm bored. How did Fantastic Four come into the world? Oh, there you go.
It's very interesting, yeah. My biggest complaint with it is like I'll be reading an issue and finish the issue and want to go to the next not the next one, but like I said, if I'm caught up on a series where it's the last one that's available, I want to then go back into the app to go read like the other X-Men or something like that. I have to like close the app and then reload the app to get back to where I was.
There's a lot of little glitchy issues like that. That I found. Same thing, like tracking issues moving through them. Did it save the comic I was looking at? No, all of a sudden now it's back 4 issues from where I know I left off. That kind of crap. But at the end of the day, it's like I said, like I know where I'm at, but to just have that access, it's so I'll cool. Put up with the glitches.
Yeah, which is fair, and they'll get better. I mean, Disney and Marvel are a small company. You got to give them patience.
Eventually, they'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out. That type of thing. Okay, so Tre is getting back into comics. Obviously, he has his mainstays that he's getting into, but I thought it'd be really fun if we gave him some suggestions. As he's alluded to, I've given him some suggestions.
I was going to say, you can't give me any that you've already given.
No, so I'll let you know kind of the ones I've recommended. Okay. And I recommend this to the listeners every single week. You got to read Immortal Hulk. I just finished it. It's the ending was. We'll talk about this in a different podcast. The ending was a little meh, but Immortal Hulk as a whole is one of the best comic book lines of all time, in my opinion, so far. I've recommended Jason Aaron Thor back in like I think it was 2012, 2013 or something like that.
God of Thunder.
You really got me into that, so it was really good. But just Jason Aaron and Ribic, I think was the art.
Yeah.
Highly recommend that. And I think I recommended all of the new X-Men stuff. I don't think all of it's great. I mean, he's rereading all of it, so he can tell you more about it. But there's certain ones that are really good. And like the Jonathan Hickman House of X, Powers of 10, you have to read. Like it's really good there. So I think is there any one more I have recommended recently?
Well, I remember us talking about Ultimate X-Men, but I don't think it was a recommendation. I just think I'm probably
I
going to move
like
on. Yeah, I was probably going to move on there after Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about Ultimate X-Men, again, I'll say this to the listeners as well, highly recommended, is post-Ultimatum. Ultimate X-Men is really good. Apparently the guy who wrote it, piece of shit, but which happens a lot in comic book industry. But the story arc they were going with was really good. So like I think it's just called Ultimate Comics X-Men at that point, but it's highly recommended. Okay. But yeah, what are your recommends, David? And it doesn't have to be new; it can be old stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, Spider-Man wise, I always recommend is the Kraven's Last Hunt. Still to this day, one of my favorite storylines, just because, again, getting the comics each week, and the first issue starts off with Spider-Man getting shot, killed, and now I gotta wait a month to find out what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
So it's like that kind of thing. It was a great run. Dealt with some pretty dark material as well, but it was fantastic.
I hope they do Kraven well.
Yeah,
in the movies.
Yeah, I hope,
yeah, because I really like Kraven.
Who knows, man? I don't know.
You know, as far as some of the other comics, like I would look at. There's the great thing about, like, if you like X-Men, there's tons of, you know, what I would say are easily little graphic novels that you should grab if they even produce them in a graphic novel, like in series, not like, you know, 10 of X or House of X or 10, depending on how you read that. Is stuff like Mutant Messiah was awesome. Executioner's Song, great. I just got you a graphic novel on the first Mutant Massacre. Those are all great. If you like Bendis, who does Spider-Man, his Daredevil run, which he wrote the whole thing.
That too,
It is amazing, and the two artists that worked with him through most of it were just like the perfect fit for that dialogue heavy kind of writer. Was fantastic. The current run in Daredevil is out of this world. Which just blended into Devil's Reign, sorry. Which is just blowing my mind right now. It's been awesome. You know, the Thor ones that you mentioned were great.
The new Thor's really good too.
Yeah.
There's a new writer called Donny Cates. He's done a lot of crazy stuff. What he's doing with Thor is just like, what? It's pretty nutty. I highly recommend. What is it? Just God of Thunder? Thor got it? No, that was the Jason Aaron one.
That was the Jason.
Yeah. What was the name of this one?
Just Thor.
Okay, yeah.
But
it's really good.
It's been good. Hickman's run on the Avengers was amazing.
Pretty good. Yeah, that was like Marvel Now.
It read right into Secret Wars.
Yeah, Secret Wars. I think I've recommended you this as well. But yeah, Secret Wars was amazing. It was super good.
I had read like one issue of Secret Wars, and it did seem like, obviously it was a couple of years ago, but it did seem pretty interesting. The crazy thing too is I want to consume it all. Like now hearing you guys talk about it, it's like, I want to I want to just like take it all in now, but it's gonna take time.
100%. I think the other nice thing I like about Marvel Unlimited is you can search by author. So like what I discovered, so Immortal Hulk is written by Al Ewing, and I'm like, dude, I love this. I got to find out what else he did. He did a really good run on Loki. Yeah. He did something called the Ultimates. Like it was outside the Ultimate Universe. He did the Ultimates, really good. So I think that's another thing to recommend is like writers. Al Ewing's great. Donny Cates is great. Jason Aaron's great. I mean, he's had some misses lately, but a lot of his older stuff was really good. Obviously, Bendis has like 20 years of Marvel books you can read. Like, he was the guy for a long time, so.
I'll have to, like, because that's the thing is, like, I do like Bendis a lot, and I'm very much into, like, story heavy.
Me too.
So that's the thing is where I want to be careful, because I do want to branch out and start to see these other writers and artists.
I mean, there was a point where Bendis was writing everything.
Everything.
He's got a run in Avengers, he's got the Daredevil, he's got the Spider-Man, Ultimate. Spider-Man, did the Daredevil. Like he's done a lot, and that is a great way of going. Okay, I like this guy's writing, and okay, but maybe I'm not a huge like Doctor Strange guy.
Yeah.
But he's writing Doctor Strange. I'll give it a try, and then I'd be surprised that like, wow, I like the way he writes this character.
Yeah.
Like it just changes the perspective on it.
Yeah.
I'd have to see that one because I'm not a huge fan of Doctor Strange, but.
I don't think I've ever run. Oh, Strange Academy. So it's really weird because I'll go from Ghost Rider, which is like let's go punch the devil in the face, all the way down to Strange Academy, which is basically Harry Potter. Like I have that range, and it's just one of those things where I do like Strange Academy a lot.
I'm the same way.
This is Greg's week or monthly pitch meeting for Strange Academy.
Hey, I haven't tried to convince you to read Runaways yet. So so
did you watch that show?
I tried.
I had it on my list. Is it stupid?
It's like our 4th episode. It was just me ranting about how bad it is.
Oh, okay.
Because what's funny is the guy who wrote Why the Last Man wrote the original Runaways, Brian K. Vaughan. And I love Brian K. Vaughan, but the show was so garbage. It was bad. You can listen to that podcast. It was a rant for sure. I don't know. Any questions you have for us or anything like that? For recommendations or anything like that? Or any questions you have just about our nerddom in general, since you haven't listened to the podcast, apparently.
Okay, well, first of all, I didn't know this was a requirement.
No, I'm just joking. My wife was on a podcast one time. She didn't listen to this episode, yeah.
I think the biggest thing for me is how much time do you guys spend reading comics? Like, I want to know. Like, I've never asked someone this. How much time do you think in a week, approximately, do you spend reading comics?
Probably not as much as you'd think. Like I mean, I probably spend, I would say probably anywhere between an hour to 2 hours a day. Mm-hmm. Like, and that's just because I'm trying to catch up on like, the most recent issues that just came out. I'll kind of power through them. There might be some like older stories that I'm like just curious about, and I just go like, you know what. I remember reading this and it was great. I'm gonna go back and read that again.
It's stuck in your head, and you're like,
I'm gonna go back and read it again.
Yeah.
But I would say probably no more than 2 hours. Probably closer to the 1 hour mark.
A day though? That's crazy to me. Yeah.
Last month, or was it last month or the month before when I started Marvel U? Yeah. It was like 3 to 4 hours a night. Like I would get home and just because I just couldn't stop thinking.
You also don't understand how much time I have.
Yeah, this guy has a lot of free time on his hands. Right? If I had as much free time as Dave, I'd be reading more. Yeah, I'm a millennial in the sense of like I'm built. Thank you. I'm built for binge method because like Netflix and all that stuff, which is in my head. I want every single episode right now type of thing. So, but what I like to do is I go through waves. So like one day I'll read like 5 different graphic novels in one day, but then I won't read anything for like 2 weeks. Like I'm on a bit of a drought right now. Like I finished Immortal Hulk and I haven't read something since, which maybe it's just because it's that good. But
it's been like 2 weeks for me since I've actually been on the app because I've been playing the Mass Effect series. So like that's the thing too is like all the other interests I have it's like finding the time because I was just as soon as I got the app I ran through Hawkeye. Then I started reading other issues. Then I was like, Ultimate Spider-Man. Oh, I remember that when I was a kid. I'm going to go and
that's the downside of having all of it available at once. Is there's too much to read sometimes. But I'm definitely a binge method where it's like I'll sit down and read a crap ton in like one day, but then take a break for like a week. And it also depends on like if we have something to do for the podcast. Like I said, when we were trying to do the podcast for the crossover events, I was reading so much for like a month because I was trying to catch up on before the podcast type of thing. So it does fluctuate a bit. So. But I'm the same way with that with a lot of the media I consume too, right? Like anime, I'll go through like, I'm doing nothing except watching anime for like a week, and then I'll just take a break for like a month.
Well, and I mean, I'll go through phases of like I say, pretty consistent. Like I'll touch a little bit of it every day or every week, but I'll go through phases where I'm just like hardcore into comics right now.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, good storylines or something's going on, and I'll just be pouring everything I have into that. And then the next thing I know, I'm like, do you know what? All of a sudden, it's Dungeons and Dragons, or it's a good video game comes out, and I'm just like, I just pour into the video game, and other stuff kind of gets put off the side. I still dabble a little bit, but I'll just kind of bounce around all the time and get like really into it, and then I leave
That's
it for a bit.
exactly what I'm like too. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a millennial, Dave. No.
Welcome to the club. Step into the web.
We were built for Netflix. No, yeah.
I can disprove that because I like weekly comics.
No. There you go. You ruined it.
The crazy thing for me too, like, is with my job, like I'm writing every single day too. So
Yeah.
I have a screen in front of me. I'm reading all the time.
Yeah.
So that's also kind of a deterrent because I also read novels. Like I read constantly. So it's when I get home, I want to sit down and watch something like Frasier or something like that. I'm a huge Frasier fan too. I've ran through that series 3 times, so anyways.
You didn't vet this guy?
I love Suicide Squad. I love Frasier.
We needed fresh blood on the table. We had to mix it up once in a while, that type of thing. So
Fair enough.
yeah. No, I think that's a good place to stop unless you guys got anything left to say.
I'm good. I can keep going.
We can keep going forever.
Yeah,
We'll do a part 2 eventually. We'll get somebody else in here, and we'll just bombard them with new stuff. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Let us know in the comments if you have any recommendations for what Trey or even Dave and I should try checking out. It could be new, could be old type of thing. And yeah, make sure to follow us wherever you found your podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.